Wow, you guys, I'm so impressed that you guys came today. It's one of those dreary days that I wouldn't fault you if you stayed at home watching Netflix on autoplay. Yes. All right, so I'm just going to jump in. I have a long presentation, so if I speak fast and you have a question, just stop me. But I've got a lot that I want to share with you today. So I think a lot of you guys know that I study the brain as it's developing and how different high-risk behavior affect that brain. So if you are a parent or a clinician, it's really important that you understand the two parts of the brain that are really growing and developing. My favorite adolescent researcher, Lawrence Steinberg, says that adolescents have a well-developed accelerator, but only a partially developed brake. The part of the brain that is the accelerator, right here, our fantastic limbic system, which comes online and is fully formed and developed by about the age of 11, 12. Yes, this is our primitive, very old fight, flight, freeze part of the brain, which is fully mature by puberty. Our brake, known as the prefrontal cortex or frontal lobe, does not completely come online until 24, 25. So why the discrepancy? Why does nature make us have to raise kids that have such a gap, right? Well, the idea is that this part of the brain helps them push away and individuate from us. They need to get that kind of snarky, argumentative attitude and not want to kiss us out in front of school when we're dropping them off anymore. Like, they need to push us away so they can individuate. This is also the part of the brain that seeks novel experiences, which they also need to do to figure out who they are. Unfortunately, they don't develop the whole entire brake for quite a few years after. That's why we, as adults, have justification, scientific justification, to be their frontal lobe until they grow one of their own. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about this particular period of brain development, which is really critical when we know that higher level executive functioning skills are coming online, the second part. And so this is the time when these higher level skills come online. So the brain really develops in two phases. The first phase, from birth to about puberty, is when our lower level executive functioning skills really develop. Those are the ones that we need to get us up in the morning, out the door, remembering our lunch. When we hit puberty, right about there, our phase 2 brain development kicks in when we start growing higher level executive functioning skills. These are the ones that we need to get up and out of our parents' house and become fully self-supporting adults. The number one most critical skill that predicts adult success, past IQ and past socioeconomic status. Can you guys guess which one it is? It's in this column. Hint, hint. Did somebody say impulse control? You got it. Ding, ding. That is the number one predictor of adult success. Interestingly enough, how well you can control yourself, no matter how smart you are or how much money you make. If you can't control yourself, bad things happen. So what I propose is that you remove performance-based praise from your vocabulary and insert what I call brain-based praise. So instead of saying nice job, I want you to say, ooh, I like how you solved that problem. Instead of saying good work, I want you to say, wow, I love how you totally controlled yourself today. That's amazing. Actually target the specific executive functioning skills, especially if your child is struggling with one of those. Target that and start using brain-based praise. Okay, so let's do a critical deep dive into specifically how technology is affecting the brain as it's growing and developing. So I've got some use it or lose it challenges for your brain. First one, how many hours do teens of our I generation, the Gen Zs, our young ones today, spend looking at a screen every day? Okay, guess how many hours, you guys? 6? Okay, well, let's see. So here are the generations, and the good old internet was born in 1983. I was 13 years old and making mixtapes on my boombox radio that I carried with me to school because that was the cool thing to do back then. And the millennials used for 5 to 6 hours of recreational screen time per day. Then our smartphone came along in '92, and on average 7 to 9 hours of screen time per day. That's a lot of screen time. So when you ask our Gen Zs, are you concerned about this? They say absolutely. They say that it's a problem. They say that they're spending too much time on their cell phones and that they're spending too much time on social media. Whenever I do this presentation for schools, either junior high or high school, I get tons of kids who ask me questions about this. But of course, their well-developed accelerator wants to keep using it, but their partially developed brake doesn't have enough impulse control, really growth yet, to maintain a good hygiene with it. Is technology rewiring the brain? I think we all know the answer to that. And it has everything to do with the use it or lose it principle. As our brain grows and develops throughout, really, we develop long pathways of neurons based upon what we use. This is a magnified picture of an infant neuron. And as that neuron grows and develops, you can see those beautiful dendrites that reach out to other cells, making long strings of complicated connections for what we're doing. So, when I coach parents, what I usually do, especially if I see a child I look at the child and I'll ask a question, and if that child looks over at mom or looks at dad for the answer, that gives me a clue that we may be over-functioning a little bit for that child. If that child is relying on parents to solve problems, make decisions, talk for them, they're not growing long strings of neurons for problem solving, decision making, communication. They're growing long strings of neurons for dependency on us. One reason why we want to be very brain-based and start to reinforce those executive functioning skills, we want long strings of neurons in their prefrontal cortex for those abilities. Now, what we know is that when we engage in an activity for 3 or 4 hours consecutively, we literally grow those connections. So if you want to be really good at soccer, if you want to be good at debate, practice those activities for 3 or more hours consecutively. Literally, your brain will grow dendrites that reach out to other neuronal connections, making long strings of neurons for these skills. But if you want to be really good at Fortnite or really good at TikTok, do those for 3 or 4 hours consecutively at a time. Your brain will go long strings of neurons for these skills. Okay, do you see where I'm going with this? Okay, good. So that's going to be your general rule. This is a picture of an internet cafe in China. We have a lot of research available to us about technology addiction from Asian cultures who've been struggling with it for about 5 to 15 years longer than we have. So we see that it's changed their culture so much, they've actually had to change how they do a lot of things. Like they put technology walkways in because people won't look up from their technology and are walking out into traffic and suffering debilitating accidents or death. So a lot of times we think, oh my gosh, that's not happening here, but guess what city this is in? Washington, D.C. New York has them too, and LA is starting to have them as well because it's also happening there. So this is a study that's been replicated many times, and I love their graphics, so I've used it for many years. But it really shows you how technology is shaping those long pathways. This study was conducted on 2 groups of adolescents. The first group was a normal group of adolescents who only surfed the internet for a few minutes a day. These researchers took a look at structural MRI technology because they wanted to find out what their brain connectivity looked like. If you were to connect all the red dots, you would see the healthy brain connectivity of an adolescent who uses their brain for a wide variety of activities. And so lots of nice connections all over the brain, all the lobes are working together. Then they took a look at a group of students who had dropped out of high school and had spent 12 or more hours a day at the internet cafe. All they did with their brain is surf the internet, play games, shop, look online. The purple lines indicate their brain connectivity. I want you guys to think use it or lose it here. Because you see, we're looking from the top down. This area of dense connection indicates they're using that part of the brain a lot. That part of the brain is the sensory and the motor cortexes, which makes sense. That's what they're using. But check out how many pathways they have into their prefrontal cortex. One pathway. This is scary because if you think when those kids age out to the age of 25, that is when our brain development peaks. Those executive functioning skills peak at 25. If they're peaking here, then that's what their baseline level is for the rest of their lives. That means executive functioning, processing speed, psychosocial maturity, all those things are going to peak lower. So they can learn, but it will take them longer to learn. They won't make the most empathic people. They won't make the most enduring employees. And what we see is hundreds of thousands of kids are doing this in many countries. Okay, so what are we losing? Here's a few of the things that, because we're not using them, we're losing these skills. And one of those is the ability to daydream. Just sit and imagine what is going on in the world, having daydreams. We don't do that like we used to because we're always plugged in to screens. There is a lot of research on the effect of TV screens on growing brains, and all of it is bad. All of it. Even having a TV on in the background when kids are growing up is distracting to them, and they don't actually get busy doing those physical things that babies and toddlers need to do in order to grow the brain and the body. And so what we see now, though, is we can multiply those effects by however many screens we are engaged in. By show of hands, who has 2 monitors on their desk? Right? That's happening more and more and more, right? We have more and more to plug into. Quite interesting. So there's no need to daydream, solve many problems, and the attention is being split. We are losing memory, especially spatial skills. So a spatial skill is literally our ability to memorize and understand where we are in relation to the map of the world. And so does anybody remember key maps? Oh my God, my key map was such a mess in my car because I was constantly using it, right? I lived in square 491, I knew exactly where I was in relation to it. And but if you tell a child to maybe travel a mile away from their city, and if they kind of look around, if they don't have a cell phone, they could panic because they wouldn't know how to get home from short distances because we're so dependent upon our GPS. Even if we know where we're going, we use GPS. Why? Traffic, to figure out the best way to get there, right? So what I've been trying to do now is when I go to someplace new, I try to just look at the map once and try to navigate there on my own so that I won't need it the next time that I go there. This is a skill that we need to teach our children how to do as well. How to get someplace without the GPS so we can learn how to navigate. So what we're seeing is, okay, so this right here is a really great picture of our hippocampus. It looks like a little pea pod in there. But that is the part of our brain that stores memories. Now, what we've seen in history is that as we age, the hippocampus does get smaller, especially if we have cognitive impairment or illnesses such as Alzheimer's. But what we're seeing globally are reports that our hippocampus is just simply shrinking because we're using it less. And it makes a lot of sense because we don't really need to memorize stuff anymore. If you want to know something, you don't need to pull it from your memory. All you have to do is what? Google it. Which is so kind of, there's going to be movies made of this if there haven't already been, right? But if all of our memories are stored, our collective memories as a culture are stored in the cloud and the cloud goes down. Do we have to do all this over again, right? Or what if the government takes over the cloud? Or has that happened? I don't know, maybe. Okay, bad joke? Yeah. So what's interesting, though, is that we don't have to. So this part of the brain is getting smaller. It really is just atrophying because we don't use it. And along with that, our attention span. So back in 2000, some researchers recorded and looked at how long is the human attention span, and they surmised that we could, on a good day, pay attention for 12 whole seconds without moving our attention onto something else. Who thinks they can do that today? Want to have an attention span race? So what do y'all think it is now? It's definitely gone down. I know, right? So here's what they say today, or in 2018, that it's actually down by a few seconds. And it's interesting, the researchers who did this study, they said that this is actually the same attention span as a goldfish. Which I think is like, I want to know how they figured the goldfish's attention span, you know? But that's interesting, right? Yeah. I kind of am jealous of my cats. My cats can just stare out into space forever. You know, just a great attention span. So, okay, here is something that I think is really concerning. We'll talk about how to repair this, but I want you to think about your memory. You have 3 different kinds of memory: working, short, and long. Your working memory is like a little juggler inside of your brain. And I don't know why, mine's a boy, but I can see my little working memory in there juggling bits of things. So I'm writing this book right now. And what I'll do is I will read 10 different journal articles. And I'll have 10 different balls in the air of what I want to say in like 2 or 3 sentences, right? And so I'm consolidating all this information and putting it into a sentence. And if I want to memorize something, I will focus in on it. I will do some sort of a memory tool to memorize it, and then it dumps into my short and long-term memory stores, and then I can just retrieve it later on. But there are so many things that are competing for those 7 balls. Please know, your working memory only has the capacity to put 7 balls in the air at any given moment. If any of you guys remember when we moved from 7 digits to 10 digits with that darn extension, the area code, right? So it became really difficult to memorize people's phone numbers after that. And this is why. It exceeded our working memory capacity. And now we have too many things that are interfering with this working memory capacity. And so our attention span is just being split. And then when we sit down to work on something, it's pretty difficult. And it's being diagnosed as what? ADD. But is it? So how is this affecting our kids? Kids that can take cell phones with them into school. If they've got those 7 bits of information that they're juggling in the air and they're working on something in class and they get a notification or a text message or something and they divert their attention to what's there on the screen, and then they come back. You guys have all done it too. You're kind of discombobulated and you're like, oh, okay, what was I working on? And it's almost like you have to put those 10 balls back into the air again and then focus. But for kids, that takes longer. How many minutes of learning do you think they just lost? 9. I know, isn't that scary? Especially if you think like your average class is what, 45 minutes, 50 minutes? And if they get distracted a few times in class, oh my gosh, like they're already losing so much. And then when they get home, they have all this extra homework and all this stuff to do. Oh, and they get quite overloaded. Okay, so we'll talk too about how to prevent that. If you have a kid who goes to a school that allows phones, one thing that it's important for you to do is to turn off their phone during the day. Like if you want to send them a text message, please wait. The number 1 offender of this is moms. I can't tell you, I had a kid one time came into my office and he was so frazzled. And he was like, God, she won't quit texting me. I said, how many times has she texted you today? He sat down and he counted 32 texts. And they were all during the day. As if he's just sitting there waiting, right? And he's got that seems like everybody's like, oh, but I promise you, normal healthy people do that too, right? We all do. We just like send it because that's what we're thinking. Please remember this when it's your kid and you have the capacity to shut their phone off during the day. They don't need it, right? I mean, don't you guys remember if somebody needed you when you were in school, like somebody came and got you, right? And they took you to the principal's or the administrator's desk so you could have a phone call. Okay, how is it affecting our physical health, not just our brain? So what we're seeing is more and more cases of nearsightedness because we're spending a lot of neurons in our occipital lobe looking at things that are really close to us. So we are losing the ability to see far, and that is called myopia. Can't see far. So more and more people are losing this type of vision and having to get corrected for it. So this book, you guys, it's so amazing. It's been about 1.5 years now that it's been out. Dr. Quint Twenge wrote a book called iGen, Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less rebellious, more tolerant, less happy, and completely unprepared for adulthood. She studies and compiles studies of how technology has affected the different generations. And what she put in her book that I thought was the most salient, most important statistic is that our iGens are experiencing more depression, hopelessness, meaninglessness, and suicide risk than any other generation that came before them since we've been collecting data on these points. And she's pointing the finger at screen exposure. Our iGens get 2 hours less of face-to-face eye contact than the Generation Xers did. Now, please remember that face-to-face eye contact is how we get lots of healthy dopamine spikes. We have lots of mirror neurons in our prefrontal cortex. When a baby smiles at you, what do you do back? When they grimace, you do the same thing. Like, it's hard not to make the same face because we have mirror neurons. Whenever I describe to kids, especially little kids, where their frontal lobe is, I see half the audience put their hand up here. Mirror neurons are so important and connected to the wonderful attachment part of our brain that increases dopamine levels and oxytocin levels and serotonin levels. And if we get 2 hours less face-to-face time, it does make a good argument that that's probably why our kids are experiencing this. Now, depression skyrocketing. When we are connected to the global village, we're really disconnected from each other. We don't get that face-to-face time. And technology keeps our brain on edge, making us more susceptible to having anxiety problems. Our stress response starts really in our limbic system, and it's kind of like a temperature gauge, right? That's got kind of off, mild, moderate, and then danger. Technology keeps us plugged in so often because of something called the constant state of insufficiency. So nothing is ever finished. And so every time that you leave a task unfinished, you leave one of those balls in the air in your working memory, or at least a part of it. I remember about 30 years ago listening to a self-help guru who was talking about getting rid of all that energy that is out there left undone in the world. He's the one who told me, you need to go clean your junk drawer out because there's so many things in there, right? You put stuff in there, oh, I'll do that later, I'll do that later. That actually takes energy from you and it blocks spaces in those working memory. But today, there's always more, ... right? There's like, when are you ever finished with all the shows in the season? Now, right, you've got that horrible message that plays that says, are you still watching? You know, and you have to do it's not the walk of shame, it's the grabbing the remote of shame, where you say yes, right? Don't you hate that? It's kind of like it should just shame you. You're a loser, get up, go do something else. No, not one more season, go exercise or go look at somebody in the face, right? So here's how this is being engineered. This constant state efficiency is keeping kids connected to screens and adults. This is one of the worst offenders. Does anybody know what a streak is? Okay, so Snapchat was invented by Satan himself. Sorry, but I really believe that. I cannot tell you. So I walk into my office, this was a couple of years ago, and I have a young client, she's about 13, and she's bawling, and you can see she's been crying all day. Her little eyes were puffy, and I thought somebody died for sure. And I found out that she lost a 392-day streak with the most popular girl at school with whom she never speaks to. Doesn't that just kill you to hear that? They don't have a relationship except for their streak. If you don't know what a streak is, if you send a picture or a text or a communication to someone, that counts as one. If you do that every day, then for 10 days you have a 10-point streak. I've had kids who've paid other kids to maintain their streaks while they're away in rehab. Paid good money for someone else to log in and keep the streaks going, because a streak is identity today. That is who they are online. But as you guys realize, the quality of that relationship is nil. There's nothing there. The same thing with likes. If you've ever counted your likes, I have so embarrassingly to say that I have done that. I have gone to see who liked my post. I wonder, oh, wow, they did. Oh, okay, but what about this person? They did, right? We make up so much information based upon what we don't know. We fill in the gaps. It's just what our brain does. And unfortunately, this is a setup for social comparison, the negative effects that come for it. Because we compare our insides to other people's outsides and always come up short here. So actually, I'm going to go back to this for a second. My new rule that I actually created a couple years ago is that, so I'm still a Facebooker, right? Like I'm not totally on Instagram, but I still Facebook because all my old people Facebook still. And so if I'm scrolling and I start to feel bad about myself, I get off. So I usually Facebook for about, 2 minutes, and then I'm off. Because I feel that myself, and I'm 49 years old. Okay, back to constant state of insufficiency. There's a kind of a nickname for scientists today. They're calling this popcorn brain. And it really is that this constant stimulation that we're plugged into. So when you're plugged into a screen, especially multiple screens, you're getting, all your brain cells are really firing so fast, and that is electrical activity. When you walk away, it doesn't just stop. Your cells continue to fire for a while until they start to calm down. So if you're constantly connected to a screen and you walk away, you still may experience this popcorn brain experience, which keeps you a little bit on edge, wanting or needing sometimes to plug back into that experience. But that makes us a whole lot less able to handle the slower pace of life. And if you want proof of that, just try to go back in 10 years, 15 years and watch an old TV show. So my husband wanted me to watch Twin Peaks because I never watched it when I was younger. And he was like, oh my God, that is a cult classic. And I was like, okay, I'm in because it's cool, right? So I watched one episode and I'm like, this is so boring. I mean, it was a slow-paced show to begin with, if you ever watched it. But today, it can't keep up with my brain's need for constant, quick sources of action. And this is one of the things that they're saying in the toddler research, is that our TV shows are so much faster, so much more violent, there's so much stimulation coming across in the media that our little teeny tiny brains can't handle that. So we really have to be careful about exposing them to that media. We know it causes sleep problems. When you expose your brain to too much white light or blue light from screens, it tells your body to make less melatonin, and it also tells it to increase it later. When the sun starts to go down, our body starts slowly producing melatonin, which makes us sleepy. Adolescents produce more melatonin than any other developmental time in their lives, and it produces it later at night. This is why they naturally stay up a little bit later And some schools in the United States have actually shifted hours, which has been beautiful for their brains. But it causes sleep problems. So we need, the rule should be to disconnect from your technology at least 2 hours before bedtime. I know a lot of you are like, how could I make my kid do that? Like they're on homework until 10, 11 o'clock at night. So minimum half hour. Teach them about popcorn brain and that they need to let their brain rest so that it can develop melatonin and they can sleep better. Constant being plugged in, especially to video games, causes a sense of amotivation. What that means is that you don't have much of a purpose outside of the game. In the game, you can have a high score, you can have all these accomplishments, but outside of the game, real life kind of doesn't compare to how much fun you have in the game. Dangerous place. We're going to talk about gamblification and the constant needing to seek novelty, which can get us connected. Okay, if you have a kid who has techno withdrawals and techno tantrum, they are not ready for their technology. This should teach you that your child is not ready. They don't have the impulse control in their frontal lobes to handle this. And I've got a video that I want to show you. It's kind of disturbing, so let me set this up. This little brother hid his cell phone in his bigger brother's room after his dad took away his World of Warcraft account.
There's a World of Warcraft account, and he is freaking out. What? Oh my god. Baby boy! Damn it, bro!
Goes on for quite a few more minutes. It's quite disturbing. I mean, he really goes primitive limbic system, this poor kid. And he's got to be, what, definitely in high school, do you think, right? Yeah. So what we're seeing is that withdrawals from technology can look very much like the same withdrawals you'd see from drugs or alcohol. It's the exact same part of the brain, and it's the exact same neurotransmitter. So, how is this affecting us? In Japan, in particular, there is a tradition of not asking for help or showing a weakness. And so, unfortunately, that makes it very common for many Asian cultures not to seek psychological help when it could actually benefit. And so, the combination of that cultural tradition and technology addiction is resulting in this particular syndrome that the Japanese culture has named Hikikomori syndrome, which is a severe form of social withdrawal, primarily from technology abuse. When kids become recluses in their own homes, but families don't seek help. Over 1 million adolescents in Japan have been diagnosed with Hikikomori syndrome. In our culture, we would call that technology addiction or impulse control disorder. We're seeing large numbers of it here and all over the globe as well. What we see is that, unfortunately, they don't get the help that they need. So the parents close them in, deliver food, allow them to live in this type of a lifestyle, and not share what's going on. It's really sad, isn't it? Okay. Video game companies have been hiring addiction scientists for years. They'll hook them up to these machines to get an idea of when dopamine spikes in the brain. They have them play the game, and when the indicators go off, they record the code that child just played in the game, and then give that code back to the video game manufacturers who put more of that code in the game. Does that piss anybody off? But it is the nature of capitalism. How addictive can they make it so that your child will play more and more and more and more? So here are some symptoms of severe addiction. If you have one or two of these, you may need to start making some small modifications in your life. If you have between 3 or 4, this is time to seek some help and create an intervention program at home. If you have 6 or more, you may need to seek treatment. There's a really good treatment center in Washington State called Restart, and all they do is treat technology addiction. So one of my clients went there and is doing really well today, but still struggles. It's kind of like food addiction. You can't get away from eating. You can't get away from technology. You have to learn how to use that in ways. But once your brain is addictive, it is really difficult to use harm reduction techniques. So there's a really good website that I love called netaddiction.com. One of my favorite researchers, Dr. Kimberly Young, has been studying technology addiction in Asia for almost her entire career. She's got a really good website that has different quizzes that parents can take and that kids can take depending upon what kind of technology they're overusing, whether it's video, social media, or the internet. Now I want to make sure you guys understand that and this is, I think, a conservative estimate. Not everyone suffers with addiction, but the idea is that about 9% of technology users do, and the real telltale signs is the usage. They're using 20 to 50 hours of recreational screen time per week. That's a lot. Okay, number 4, how does technology and social media affect our values and beliefs? So this is an important thing to think about when you're raising kids. So I don't know, have you guys ever done, like my husband, one time we were watching a TV show and I could feel him like sneaking his phone over here. And I was like, what are you doing? He's like, I'm just checking the score. And I felt so jealous and then silly because I felt jealous. But it's like he's cheating on me. But we're not doing anything but watching technology. It's a weird feeling that we have, but the underlying idea is you're not as important as to what's on the screen. And so I talked to him about, let's just watch the game, right? So that you're not doing this, so I don't have that weird reaction. But we're seeing this more and more and more, and it's affecting kids, especially kids on playgrounds. More and more teachers, unfortunately, and adults have been called and reported to CPS because of neglect. We're not watching them, we're on our technology. I really believe that and wish that school districts would ban cell phones for teachers. Teachers should not take them with them on a playground. They just should not be there. So please, though, that may need to be parent-driven. So we're seeing it really affect our communication skills, our ability to pay attention. And then, of course, is everything insta-wonderful? No, right? I mean, we may post this like, this is what I did on Saturday night, but this is really what you looked like. This is me, I'm a rock star, but this is how I really am. We don't post that. We post the polished, pretty pictures. I realized that, on my Facebook account, like I was only posting when I went on vacation, and it made me look like I was always on vacation. Like I kind of posted as a way to keep pictures for vacation, but I got to remember, I got to post real life stuff, or I'm part of the problem. This is an actual website of a mom who's teaching other moms how to create an identity online that looks polished and perfect. That is what her website does. I think she looks better here. Real life. What do you think? Right? Yes. Okay. So we don't post like, oh my God, I've had a bad day. Or if we do, we judge that person because they're attention seeking. Right? This is interesting. Every time that I meet a plastic surgeon, I always ask them, Are you seeing more selfie dysmorphia? And they're like, oh my God, yes. So people will use filters to change their face. And then they go into the plastic surgeon and say, see, my nose is too big. But all they're looking at are selfies. You guys know that you distort your face, right? When you're taking a selfie, your nose is always going to look bigger. And the plastic surgeon's like, I can't do a nose job for you. You have a perfectly fine nose. But the kids are like, no, see? Selfie dysmorphia is a thing. This study is so interesting. So they gave a picture, this picture, that depicts drinking and driving to a group of teenagers. And they said, tell me what you're thinking while they were in a functional MRI machine. And this is what their brain looked like with 6 likes. So the occipital lobe is back here. So they're looking at the picture, but not much is going on anywhere else. And when you ask them, what are you thinking? They're like, it's bad. Don't do it. Duh. Well, at least I think they say it like that because they're teenagers, right? They've got to be snarky. So when they increase the amount of likes, look what happened. The kids were like, wait, what's going on? They kept looking at the picture more and more and more and more. And when you ask them, what are you thinking now? They say, well, maybe it's not so bad. I mean, more people liked it. You can see they're thinking, they're trying to understand why people like this. And you see what their brain does. More people like it must mean it's okay. We need to watch what our kids are liking online. And if they like things that go against our family code, that's when we need to have a discussion about that. Because going along with the majority is not always a good representation of your family's values. Okay, so what do iGen'ers report the scariest thing is? So in my generation, they did this survey, like what scares you the most? The number one thing on the survey was public speaking. The number 2 was death. Right? We fear public speaking more than we do death. Today, this is different. They did another survey. What is the scariest thing to you? And I'll give you a hint. It's not bears. Our iGen said that it is conflict. They are so afraid of conflict. Does anybody hire millennials? Yeah. Do they avoid you like the plague? They do, because they don't know how to communicate when there's a conflict or when they have needs. They are so afraid to do this. I've had kids who I said, just call them on the phone. They're like, total panic attack. I've had to do phone training with kids, young adults, because they don't call people on the phone. I actually had a girlfriend who picked up the phone one day and she was like, do you need something? And I was like, yeah, just to connect with you. And she was like, oh? Like she didn't know. She's like, well, can't you just text? And I was like, no. That's when I realized she was too young for me to actually be her friend. Like that's not how I connect with you. Like I need to see you and talk to you. Like when I was a kid, my mother would like go to find the phone, which was actually connected to the wall, and she would see the cord and she would follow it into my room. Because we talked on the phone for hours. So it's quite interesting because all of that early conflict when we were in middle school, that's an important part of developing communication skills for conflict. All that drama actually set us up to learn good conflict. Okay, let's talk about gaming. There are decades of studies that show causal links to video game aggression and real life aggression. Now, there are a lot of researchers that argue this, but after decades of research that shows aggressive attitudes or violent behavior does increase in certain ages if they play violent video games. So there is a link. But here's the good news. When they stop engaging in the violent video games, their violence and their aggressive behavior goes down. Use it or lose it. So this is a study that I thought was just so scary about empathy. This was done with college-age 19, 20, and 21-year-old boys. They had 2 groups, the control group, and that was a small number but this study has been replicated many times, so it's a good example. Small number of people in the control group who did not play a video game. They took a picture of their brain activity at baseline 1 week later and 2 weeks later. And what you see is kind of the same areas of the brain that are activated, specifically here in the frontal lobe and really close to the orbital prefrontal cortex, a very important part of the brain, especially for feeling and experiencing empathy. So what these guys did is when they were in the functional MRI machine, they were asking them empathy questions, giving them empathy scenarios, and asking them to devise empathic responses. So we should see this part of the brain light up. Then we have our experimental group of 12 guys who played Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare 2 hours a day for 2 weeks in a row. They gave them the same empathy test that the control group guys got, and you see significantly less electrical activity in the prefrontal cortex area, really the whole brain. Even though on baseline they had very similar responses. Now when you ask these guys, what are you thinking? They would literally tell you, I can't have empathy. I'm in a first-person shooter game killing people for 2 or more hours a day. I have to dumb my empathy down. Think about this, you guys. Kids who are playing for 2 hours a day for decades while their frontal lobe is growing, it has to be on and connected and using for them to grow those executive functioning skills. Now, the beautiful thing about this study is after the experiment was done, they asked those guys not to play the game anymore, and they took another brain scan 2 weeks later, and they had all returned to similar levels of functioning. So that tells you that use it or lose it is at play. They're back to having empathy again, devising empathy, which makes us really good relational human beings when they have that. Okay, gamification. So what we know is that when we make something a game, it actually makes people more productive. They get activated. This company engages everyone always by making the things that they do on a daily basis at this company more like a video game. I thought it was really interesting because what they say is they go beyond points, badges, and leaderboards, use all the mechanisms and strategies that make games exciting and addictive to sustainably drive employee engagement. They're just coming out and saying, we're going to make your employees addictive, and they'll work harder. Okie doke. Gamblification, combining gambling mechanics into video games to make them more enticing. A big one is those free-to-play games online. So basically what this is what's called a predatory monetization scheme. They say, this is free to play, download it, but then you play for a little while and you get stuck. And what do you have to do to get unstuck? Buy money. Buy something in the game that helps you, and it's really a disguise. It entices players to get emotionally and financially committed. So it's designed to encourage your spending, and of course, they get your gamer information and they use it against you. This is predatory practices. Microtransactions, those little teeny small purchases, like you can have a different skin, you can buy more currency, you can buy levels up or powers up. Other virtual items, they're tiny. They may be just a few cents or $1, and you think it's no big deal, but it pulls you in. So one of the things that just drive me nuts, every time I read in this literature, they called them whales. The companies that create predatory monetization schemes, they target people that they nickname whales. Those are people that will easily give up money online. And the major audience, so it's only 1.5 of all users that they call whales, but the majority of them are children. They don't have enough frontal lobe to say no. Ugh, drives me really nuts. And then this one. This is really gambling in disguise, a loot box. A loot box is something that may or may not have the object you need to further your gameplay. May or may not. So you can buy one for $5.99 or you can buy three for $8.99, but you're never really sure if what you need will be in there. So it's a gamble. But the reason that it's not gambling is because they don't use real money. If it were real money, it would be gambling and it would be illegal. You guys got to know and ask your kids, do you guys have loot boxes in this game? And if they do, please don't let them play it. It's really very addictive. So, real money. Okay. Something that we also see is that this gamblification and gamification is changing our motivation. More and more people are not feeling motivated intrinsically to go out and do. I have more parents that call me and say, how do I motivate my kid to do this? Well, what motivates you guys? Well, we're motivated by extrinsic things, which is normal. Like when we need to make money, we want gold stars, we want accolades, we are afraid of not getting those, fear of failure. But we also need a good smattering of healthy intrinsic motivation, being curious, just doing it because you love it, or wanting to belong, or have mastery over something. But gamblification and gamification work against this and really just add more extrinsic motivation. Okay, last one. I'm talking so fast, I want to make sure we get done. How do we balance? Let's talk about the healthy things. So this is not healthy. Do not buy this. This is so disgusting to me. We have a script. They need to look in our eyes. They need to see our facial expressions. They need to be connected. They don't need to be on the potty playing video games. This is not a healthy way to potty train your kids. Please, 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 please do not do that. This is not what we want to see. We really want to see a lot. Do not do that. We want to see a lot of this. A lot of activity, a lot of healthy face-to-face things. So there's something new. Do you remember the food pyramid? Now it's the activity pyramid. Print this out, put it on your fridge, and when your kid says, I'm bored, say, I don't know, go look at the activity pyramid. Pick something to do. And then we want to give them lots of time without technology so they can daydream. We want to make sure that we teach them how to handle conflict so they get good at addressing feelings and practice asking for what you need. Finish what you started. So you guys know that if you get multitasked, you get frazzled. Your attention goes in different places. Have a homework place in your house for kids that is distraction-free. If you have kids who are visual learners, they do best playing music. If you have kids who are auditory learners, they do best with no music or certain types of classical music. So please make sure that if your kid asks for that, that you don't take that away because it actually could help them stay focused. But sure, kids who are very auditory, if they hear music, they will listen, they will sing to it. It takes their attention to the auditory nature of the music. I'm very auditory, right? So, but I play cello music when I'm focusing. For some reason, that just helps my brain waves. But if I hear the TV, I get distracted, like because my auditory learner wants to go learn what's on the TV. And so, but there are kids who are very visual learners, and so what they need, right, is an auditory distraction, and they can play loud music in a headphone, and they could study for hours. That's not necessarily bad, right? That's what the research says. But we want to make sure that the computer they're using for homework is out in the open so we can watch and just check and monitor, because when they get distracted, we have to help them not be distracted. And we want to make sure that they don't have the notifications coming in, that computer has all that stuff off. Have the ability to turn off the Wi-Fi either at the router or on each device so that you can shut it down at a certain time of the night. Make sure that technology stays outside of the bedroom, and here are the pediatric guidelines for screen time. So up to about 5 years, really no screen time except for 1 hour a day co-watched. Co-watching. Please know that educational computer games do not increase reading, problem solving, decision-making abilities. They don't. Research has shown that. Kids have those abilities that mature on their own naturally if given a great environment. The best thing you can do to help your kids grow those skills is read to them. Reading to them with them. Co-watching video things together. And then, so here's kind of my rule. So I think this is actually too much because it's per day. So here is Dr. Collier's plan. In elementary school, keep recreational screen time out of the work week. And say, nope, we earn that on the weekends. No more than 2 hours per day on Saturday or Sunday. You can earn it in half-hour increments. So then they may not earn the whole time. And then on Saturday, if they've earned their time, they get 2 hours. But then the second part of that rule is you have to pull your brain away and go do something else to balance out for 2 hours. And if they say, I don't know what, go to the activity pyramid. And then on Sunday, we repeat if they've earned it. But no recreational screen time during the week. They already have too much screen time for homework and academics. So keep the recreation out. And if they say, well, but that's what I do for recreation. That's my reward, is my video game time. Too bad. Go find something else to do with your brain that's not technology. Then in middle school, keep it out of the work week. Monday through Friday, no recreational screen time, but you can earn it up to 3 hours consecutive time only. But as soon as you're 3 hours on, that's when your brain starts making changes. Now get off and go do something with your brain for 3 hours. Or be with them going and doing something. And then also, there'll be weeks when they didn't earn it because they didn't do good in school or they were disrespectful. And then you have a whole weekend where they don't have any screen time. In the high school, if you can still keep it out of the work week, up to 3, never more than 4 hours consecutive at a time when it's recreational screen time, whether that's TikTok or video gaming or whatever it is. So I really think this is too much. I just do. I don't think kids can handle that. There's a really good researcher named Sue Palmer. She works out of UK. She does global studies on technology and how it affects us, and she's got a great quote. She thinks that our technology is evolving faster than our human biology, and it's having some negative effects on the kids who don't have enough frontal lobe to actually control their use. I think it's having that effect on a lot of adults who are having trouble balancing that out. Okay. If you give your child a piece of technology, it should come with a contract. I found this one online and I love it. And I will share my slides with you if you would like them, so you can have this too. But then you sit down and you say, this is not yours, you don't own it, I do, I can take it away for misuse at any time. Please monitor it. And I hate to put this up here, but I've asked parents for the past 6 years, what's your favorite monitoring software? And here is the list. This one is my favorite. Because when you install it on devices, it checks your child's communication on apps, texts, all of that, and it looks for code words like algorithms. It uses algorithms to search for key terms like porn or nudes or sexting or those acronyms that they use. Like they plug all that in, so it watches it. And if you get a text that says your child just got onto a porn site, then it also, because you're standing there in a panic, it says, would you like a script to help you know what to say to them? Yes, I would.
Were you talking about one specific one?
Yeah, that one, Bark.
Bark, okay.
Bark. Yeah, they're all really good though. I've talked to a bunch of different parents who've used different ones. And they're different kind of purposes, like the Disney one. Where's the Disney? Right here, Circle. That allows you to shut off your Wi-Fi at the router, which is really nice to have. Apple actually has really good parental you can go to Apple Store and take a class on parental monitoring and how to shut off devices, right? So that you have a shut-off time. Computer goes off at 11. Phone goes off at 10. You need it, too bad, right? Learn how to do time management so that homework time gets done. That way you put sleep hygiene as an important priority. And then they learn how to do homework at school. If you have a shut-off time at night, nope, that's the time. And you keep that there. So some of these, like rescue time, works for people who are addicted to technology. It'll track their time for you. This is kind of an intervention step. And some of them have some really cool things where you can track their driving. It tracks how fast they're going, and if they go outside of a geo, boundary, it'll text you. Your kid just went to Conroe. What's he doing up there? He just sped. Then you can shut off their Wi-Fi from your home, right? So that they keep the eyes on the road. I love that. I think that this is a responsibility for modern day parenting. If you give your child, who is 14 years old, they have 15% frontal lobe capacity. You give them a phone with a camera that has access to the World Wide Web. You're going to have porn, which I haven't even had time to talk about today. You're going to have sexting, and you're going to have nudes. You're going to have a lot of legal and emotional problems that come with that. So some, nutrition, want to make sure 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, start that early. Turn off autoplay so you don't get the shameful messages. Use grayscale, check your checking. There's a study that looked at the dopamine spike just going to get your phone before your eyes even look at the screen. You get a peak in dopamine. But then as your eyes look at the screen, the dopamine peak goes down. This is why we check even though we know there's nothing there. We're just getting a little hit of dopamine every single time. Okay, so if you would like my slides, please feel free to email me. I'm doing a research fellowship here at the Hope and Healing Center to write this book, which pre-sale will start at the very end of May. We'll have a big book launch here too, and lots of fun family activities to do from the book in August, right before school starts. It's called the Neuro Whereabouts Guide. Lots of information about 18 different high-risk behaviors. There are graphs that show you when the high-risk behavior peaks so that you know when to have your prevention discussion. And the last chapter has scripts that will help you know what to say in those moments. Okay, wow.